I discovered that my wife, the one who swore eternal love and fidelity, sneaked out to a party with her friends. I shouldn't have been there, but distrust consumed me, and the coincidence of fate did the rest. The atmosphere was filled with loud laughter and vibrant music, but everything fell silent the moment our eyes met. The shock on her face was as evident as the guilt she tried desperately to hide. His expression, once so familiar, was now a puzzle of poorly formulated excuses, of secrets I never imagined existed. She walked towards me, her steps faltering, her mouth opening and closing in search of words that could erase the inevitable. But nothing could change what was already done. The betrayal wasn't just a mistake, it was a carefully woven web of lies and manipulations. I felt the weight of each of them, the venom coursing through my veins as the words I feared most began to form on their lips. "I can explain," she stammered, but nothing at that moment could calm the turmoil that was forming inside me. Every excuse that came out of his mouth was a stab at our past, a slow, painful destruction of what was once our love. I knew that behind every word there was more than just regret, there was fear, there was something darker, something I still couldn't fully understand. What she didn't know, what no one there knew, was that I was about to find out that this party, tonight, was just the tip of the iceberg. The friends who accompanied her, the complicit smiles, the shared laughter, everything was part of something much bigger. Something that was about to turn my world upside down. What else was she hiding? What else was buried beneath the smooth surface of our relationship? I needed to know. And it was just the beginning. New York, with its immensity of skyscrapers and the incessant glow of its lights, could be as lonely as it was fascinating. In the heart of this urban universe, Ethan, a man in his early 30s, struggled to maintain balance between a demanding career and a marriage that, until recently, he believed to be solid. Ethan was a lawyer, and his demanding routine often kept him away from home, but he always believed that, despite the difficulties, his relationship with Emily was unshakable. Emily, a woman who had always been the center of his life, seemed like the perfect model of a wife. She was sweet, attentive, with an easy smile and a presence that lit up any room. The two met at college, where the passion between them was instantaneous. Over time, this passion evolved into a solid partnership, a marriage built on trust and mutual respect. At least, that's what Ethan thought. Things began to change slowly, almost imperceptibly. Emily, who had always been open and communicative, began to appear more reserved, surrounded by an aura of mystery that Ethan could not decipher. Small details began to bother him, messages that she quickly hid, outings with her friends that became more frequent, and that distant look that, from time to time, appeared in her eyes. Ethan tried to push these thoughts away, believing that maybe it was just the stress of work or a phase the marriage was going through. He tried to convince himself that these feelings were unfounded, the result of his own insecurity. But the doubt planted in his heart began to grow, and the seed of distrust was already sown. Emily, on the other hand, lived on a tightrope between her love for Ethan and the influences that surrounded her. Your friends, especially Claire and Megan, were central figures in his life, but at the same time, they represented constant pressure. They weren't just friends, they were companions from a complex past, full of experiences that shaped who Emily was today. Megan, in particular, has always been a dominant force, someone who knew how to manipulate situations to her advantage, and who never hesitated to get Emily to follow her ideas. In a charming neighborhood in Brooklyn, where they lived in a classic-style house, Ethan and Emily's days became marked by a routine that disguised the growing tension. He, trying to stay focused on work, threw himself into his legal cases with more vigor than ever, while Emily, behind her calm facade, dealt with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Claire and Megan, with their intense personalities, began to play a more present role in Emily's life, introducing her to a world that Ethan was unaware of. It was in moments of silence, when Ethan came home and found Emily deep in thought, that he most felt the distance between them. Emily had become an enigmatic figure, her smile seemed forced, and there was a palpable discomfort in the air. Ethan wondered when things had changed, when that unshakable trust they shared had begun to crumble. But he avoided confronting her, perhaps for fear of what he might discover, or perhaps because he still clung to the hope that everything was a figment of his imagination. Then came that fateful night. Ethan had returned from work early, feeling the need to surprise Emily, to rekindle something that seemed to be lost. But when he got home, he found the room empty, the lights off, and a feeling of emptiness that he couldn't ignore. Emily's phone, forgotten on the dining table, was ringing incessantly. A message from Claire flashed on the screen: "We're waiting for you at the party. Megan is already here. Don't be late." Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. She had left without saying anything, without leaving any clue as to where she was going. Something inside him compelled him to go after her. He took his car keys and drove towards the place mentioned in the message, an exclusive club in the city center, where he knew high-profile parties frequently took place. Music pulsed through the club walls when Ethan arrived. He entered without hesitation, his eyes scanning the crowd for Emily. And then, he saw her. He was next to Claire and Megan, laughing, with a glass in his hand. She looked different. Freer, looser than he saw her at home. His eyes, however, carried a shadow that Ethan couldn't ignore. Emily noticed his presence almost instantly. The smile disappeared from his lips, and the color drained from his face. She turned away from her friends and walked towards him, as if each step was a painful effort. And then, when she finally stopped in front of him, the words stuck in her throat. Ethan, for a moment, didn't know what to think, what to say. He wanted to demand explanations, but Emily's expression left him speechless. There was something there, something deeper, darker, that he still couldn't understand. But he knew that night was just the beginning of a truth that was about to be revealed. Ethan felt the ground crumbling beneath his feet as Emily tried to pull herself together, but what he saw at that party had already broken something inside him. The words that should be said that night were lost between the two, as if there was an invisible barrier that prevented them from connecting. They left the party together, but the silence that followed was heavier than any argument. In the car, the only sound was the roar of the engine as Ethan drove through the dimly lit streets. Emily kept her eyes fixed on the glass, her shaking hands resting in her lap. The fear of an immediate confrontation hovered between them, but neither seemed willing to make the first move. When they finally arrived home, Ethan parked the car, turned off the engine, and remained silent, staring straight ahead. He felt a mixture of anger, pain, and confusion. Emily slowly opened the door and left, walking into the house without looking back, as if the simple act of facing him was an unbearable burden. Inside the house, the tension was palpable. Ethan approached her, his mind buzzing with unspoken questions. But once again, he held back. He watched her as she slowly climbed the stairs, each step reflecting the weight of her conscience. He wanted to follow her, demand an explanation, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the fear of the answer, or the desperate hope that everything could be resolved if he would just wait. The next morning, their routine continued as if nothing had happened. Emily busied herself with daily tasks, maintaining a mask of normalcy that only increased Ethan's anguish. She smiled, talked casually about trivial things, but there was a distance in her eyes, something that separated her from him in an almost tangible way. He, on the other hand, tried to maintain the facade of a calm man, but inside he was at war with himself. Days passed, and Ethan began to notice that Claire and Megan's presence in Emily's life was more constant than he imagined. The two friends were like shadows, always present, always influencing. There was something unsettling about the way they surrounded Emily, as if they were always on the lookout, ready to intervene at any moment. He began to question whether Emily's recent behavior was truly the result of problems in her marriage or whether there was an outside force controlling her. Ethan decided to investigate on his own. He began to observe the interactions between Emily and her friends more closely. Small details that previously went unnoticed now screamed at him. The way Megan, in particular, always took control of the conversations, leading Emily to decisions she wouldn't have made alone. Claire, on the other hand, was more subtle but equally influential, always supporting Megan and reinforcing her suggestions. Ethan remembered what Emily was like before she got so close to these friends. She was independent, confident in her choices. Now, she seemed to fade away when she was next to them, as if her own identity was in the background. He knew there was something wrong, something that was rooted deeper than just a marriage in crisis. Anguish began to consume Ethan, and he decided to confront Emily. One night, after dinner, he called her to talk. They sat in the living room, the atmosphere filled with almost unbearable tension. Emily knew that conversation was inevitable, but still, fear paralyzed her. She tried to deflect by talking about trivial things, but Ethan got straight to the point. "Emily, what's going on between us? What are you hiding?" he asked, his voice deep, filled with restrained pain. Emily hesitated, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to formulate a response. She knew this was the moment of truth, but the words escaped her mouth. Megan and Claire had a power over her that she herself didn't fully understand, but she knew she was trapped in a web that was becoming increasingly difficult to escape. "I don't know how to explain it, Ethan," she began, her voice shaking. "But it's not what you think. I never wanted to hurt you. It's just, there are things I can't control." Ethan felt anger bubbling up inside him. "Things you can't control? Or things you don't want to tell me?" He tried to remain calm, but frustration was written in every word. Emily lowered her head, unable to support him. She knew that anything she said at that moment would only make the situation worse. Megan's words echoed in her mind, reminding her that certain truths, if revealed, would destroy everything. But Ethan didn't give up. He got up impatiently and started pacing back and forth. "I feel like I'm losing you, Emily. And I don't know how to get you back." His voice broke at the end of the sentence, exposing the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide. Emily felt a tear run down her face. She desperately wanted him to understand, to know how difficult this was for her. But how could she explain something that even she herself couldn't fully understand? How could she make him understand the power her friends had over her without making her seem weak or guilty? That night ended without resolution, but with something clearer: things between them were breaking down. Trust, the foundation of any relationship, was frayed almost beyond repair. Ethan knew there was something more, something deep and deep-rooted, and he wouldn't rest until he found out what it was. Emily, in turn, struggled against the tide of conflicting feelings that haunted her. The fear of losing Ethan, the influence of her friends, and the guilt that grew every day formed a whirlpool of emotions that she couldn't escape. She knew the truth would come out at some point, but what she feared was that when it did, it would be too late. The tension increased every day, like a rubber band stretched to its limit, about to break. And deep down, they both knew they were approaching a point of no return, where the truth would finally be revealed, and nothing would be the same as before. The days that followed that night were a whirlwind of contained emotions, heavy silences and gestures that distanced more than brought them closer. Ethan, consumed by the need for answers, began to delve deeper into Emily's friendships. The seemingly innocent interactions between her, Megan and Claire began to take on a new meaning, something he couldn't ignore. There was something dark in every conversation he managed to capture, in every encounter that, at first glance, seemed trivial. One night, when Emily was in the shower, Ethan decided to check her cell phone. He hesitated, feeling a mixture of guilt and need, but the urge to discover the truth was stronger. When he opened the device, he came across a series of messages between Emily, Megan, and Claire. The words he read froze his blood. Megan, he still doesn't know anything, right? Emily, not yet, but it's getting harder and harder to hide. Claire, you need to be stronger, Em. He'll never understand what we're trying to do for you. Megan, remember, we're all in this together. Don't let him make you doubt what's right for you. Each message seemed like a piece of a puzzle that he still couldn't completely put together, but that indicated something much bigger and more dangerous than he imagined. It was clear that Megan and Claire were manipulating Emily, but what was the purpose? What did they gain from this? Ethan felt a surge of anger, but also of helplessness. He knew he needed to act, but how could he confront the truth without destroying what was left of his marriage once and for all? The next day, while they were at the dinner table, Ethan could no longer keep silent. The food was untouched, the atmosphere filled with a tension that was almost unbearable. He glanced at Emily, who was avoiding his gaze, absent-mindedly picking at her food with her fork. "What about us, Emily? Where are we in all this?" he finally asked, his voice filled with pain that he could no longer hide. Emily looked up, surprised by the sudden question. She tried to maintain her composure, but nervousness was evident in every gesture. "Ethan, please. Don't make this any harder than it already is." "I saw the messages, Emily," he continued, cutting off any attempt at a response. "I know Megan and Claire are manipulating you, but what I don't understand is why. What do they want from you? From us?" Emily's expression instantly changed. Fear, guilt, and a twinge of something he couldn't identify flashed across his face in seconds. She knew this was the moment she had been dreading since the beginning. The truth was about to be revealed, and there was no longer any escape. "Megan." Emily began, her voice cracking as she tried to find the right words. "She's always had an influence on me, ever since college. She always made me believe that she knew what was best for me, even when I wasn't sure." Ethan was silent, waiting for her to continue. He could see how difficult this was for her, but he needed to know. "When we got married, I thought I could get away from them, that I could start a new life with you, but Megan never really let me go," Emily continued, tears starting to stream down her face. "She started getting more and more involved in my life, and I got carried away." "Take it where, Emily?" Ethan asked, frustration rising. "What are they doing to you?" "They made me doubt everything," Emily admitted, her voice breaking. "They made me question our marriage, our life together. Megan always said that I was wasting my life, that I should think about myself instead of being trapped in a life that she considered mediocre." "Mediocre?" Ethan repeated, feeling a lump form in his throat. "Is this what you think of our life? Of us?" Emily shook her head desperately. "No, Ethan. I don't know what to think anymore. I got lost in this whole thing. Megan and Claire. They have a control over me that I can't explain. They took me to places, to situations I never imagined, and now I don't know how to get out." Ethan felt a mix of relief and despair. Relief at finally hearing the truth, but despair when realizing how deep the manipulation Emily was suffering was. He stood up, pacing the room, trying to process everything. "So, you betrayed me because of their influence?" he finally asked, his voice almost a whisper. Emily was silent, her face filled with guilt. She knew the answer was more complicated than a simple yes or no. Megan and Claire had fed her insecurities, her doubts, to the point where she no longer knew where her desires ended and theirs began. But Ethan needed to hear the truth. "Ethan, she began, but was interrupted by the insistent ringing of the phone. It was Megan. Emily froze, the phone vibrating in her hand like it was a bomb about to explode. "Don't answer," Ethan ordered, his voice firm but filled with an anguish he could no longer hide. "I can't lose you, Emily. I need to know. If there's still something true between us, or if they've already stolen that too." Emily looked at the phone, Megan's call insisting, as if the control she had over her life manifested itself in that incessant ringing. She knew that decision would define everything, but she was paralyzed by the fear of choosing the wrong path. Finally, she let the phone fall from her hand, tears flowing freely now. Ethan came closer, holding her by the shoulders, looking into her eyes. "Emily, whatever it is, we can get through this. But I need you to tell me the truth, the whole truth. Do you still love me? Or is that already lost?" Emily stared at him, feeling the weight of the choice she was about to make. Megan's words echoed in her mind, but there was something stronger, something deeper that still connected her to Ethan. She knew that what she had done, what she had allowed, was unforgivable. But she also knew that if she didn't free herself from that influence now, she would lose everything she still had of value in her life. "Ethan," she began, her voice cracking as she tried to muster the courage to speak. "I never stopped loving you. But I allowed them to take over my life. I let them plant doubt in me, keep me away from you. I did things that I don't know if you can forgive." Ethan was silent, processing those words. He knew that what came next would be the most difficult time of his life, but he also knew that he needed to hear the whole truth, no matter how painful it was. He held Emily's hands, feeling the fear emanating from her, and waited for her to continue. Emily took a deep breath, feeling like this was the time to unearth all the secrets, all the painful truths she had kept hidden. She knew that once she started, there would be no going back, but she also knew that this was the only path to redemption, or to the complete destruction of everything that had ever meant anything to her. "Megan always had a hold on me that I couldn't understand," he began, his voice wavering. "She knew exactly how to manipulate me, how to make me doubt everything, including what I felt for you. It was she who started to convince me that I was trapped, that I should seek more, live more. I started to leave with them, going to places I never imagined I would go to. And then I made mistakes." Ethan, still holding her hands, looked at her with a mix of pain and understanding. He knew he was about to hear something that would change everything, but he was prepared to face whatever came. "Errors?" Ethan asked, feeling the weight of that word. "What kind of mistakes, Emily?" She closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to find the strength to continue. "I got involved with someone else," he finally confessed, the words coming out as a whisper. "Megan made me believe it was the only way to free myself, to find myself again. She even made things easier, introducing me to this man, encouraging everything. I was so lost, so confused, that I ended up giving in." Ethan felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under his feet. The impact of those words hit him like a punch in the stomach, taking his breath away. He let go of Emily's hands and walked away, unable to process what he had just heard. "You got involved with someone else," he repeated in disbelief. "And it was Megan who encouraged this?" Emily nodded, tears falling again. "Yes, but I'm not trying to apologize or place blame on her. I know it was my choice, and I deeply regret it. But, Ethan, it was a mistake, a terrible mistake that I made because I was blind, influenced by someone who didn't have the best for me." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan stood up, pacing the room, trying to control the storm of emotions that was plaguing him. He wanted to scream, cry, confront Megan, but most of all, he wanted to understand why Emily had allowed things to get to this point. "Who is he?" Ethan asked finally, his voice low but filled with controlled anger. "This man you got involved with. Is he still part of your life?" Emily shook her head. "No. That was a few months ago. I realized how wrong I was, how much I was destroying myself and what we had. I ended everything, but I never had the courage to tell you. And then, things only got worse, because Megan started to use it against me, making me believe that there was no turning back, that you would never forgive me if you found out." "Did she know?" Ethan asked in disbelief. "Megan knew what you did and used it against you?" "Yes," Emily admitted, feeling the weight of guilt increase with each word. "She used it to keep me under control, to make sure I continued to follow her advice, her orders. I was trapped, Ethan, trapped in a web that I myself had helped weave, and I didn't know how to escape." Ethan felt a wave of anger so intense that he had to hold himself back from exploding. Megan not only manipulated Emily, but used her betrayal to keep her under her thumb, destroying any chance of redemption. He wondered how many other people Megan had already destroyed with her insidious influence. "Emily," he began, his voice firmer now, "I need to know. Are you still involved with Megan and Claire? Are you still under their control? Emily looked at him, seeing how much he was hurting, and knew she needed to be honest, no matter how painful it was. I still have contact with them, but not like before, he admitted. After everything happened, I started to pull away, but Megan always found a way to pull me back. She knew how to manipulate me, using guilt and fear. But I know I need to cut it off, that I need to let go. Then do it, Ethan said, his voice thick with determination. Cut all ties with them. Because if there is any chance of both of us rebuilding what was destroyed, you need to be completely free of their influence. We need to be free. Emily nodded, feeling relief mixed with deep fear. She knew Ethan was right, that there was no other way to move forward. But I also knew that Megan wouldn't give up easily, that she would try to regain control somehow. I will cut all ties, Emily promised, her voice determined. I'll do whatever it takes to save what's left between us, Ethan. But I need you to understand that this won't be easy, that Megan will try to pull me back. I know, Ethan replied, anger still burning in his eyes. But we're going to face this together. And if she tries anything, if she tries to manipulate you again, I'll be here to protect you. That night ended with the decision that Emily would cut all connections with Megan and Claire. But they both knew that this was just the beginning of a much bigger battle, a battle that would define whether the love they once shared could truly survive the secrets, the lies, and the betrayals. The days following Emily's revelation were a mix of tension and quiet determination. Ethan, although devastated, was determined to try to salvage what was left of his marriage. Emily, in turn, sank into a state of introspection, fighting the ghosts that Megan and Claire had planted in her mind. She knew she was at a crossroads, that the decisions she made now would define not only the future of her marriage, but also the kind of person she wanted to be. The first step to freeing herself from Megan's clutches was more difficult than Emily imagined. She blocked the phone numbers, deleted the social networks that her friends had access to, but still, Megan's shadow loomed over her. Every phone ring, every unexpected notification, made his heart race. She knew Megan wouldn't give up easily, that she would find a way to return. Ethan watched all this with a mixture of compassion and vigilance. He understood that although the decision to cut ties was Emily's, the fight to maintain that decision needed to be fought by both of them. He tried to be a constant presence, offering support and love, but doubt and fear continued to eat away at his confidence. He didn't know to what extent Megan had poisoned Emily's mind, and that thought haunted him. One night, as they sat together on the couch in comfortable silence, Ethan decided it was time for a difficult but necessary conversation. He turned to Emily, his gaze filled with a seriousness she couldn't ignore. Emily, he began, choosing his words carefully. I know you're trying, and I really appreciate it. But we need to talk about something important. What if Megan tries to manipulate you again? What if she shows up in your life in another way, or tries to make you doubt new? Emily closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the question. She knew that Megan was not an easy person to ignore, that her power of persuasion was something that she herself still feared. But he also knew that if he wanted his marriage to survive, he needed to find a way to resist. I've thought about that, Emily replied, her voice soft but firm. And the truth is, I don't know if I'm strong enough to face her alone. Megan has always known how to manipulate me, how to play on my insecurities. But I know that if I give in, if I allow her to come back, if you have power over me, I will lose everything we still have. Ethan nodded, sensing the gravity of the situation. He knew Megan posed a real threat, not just to the marriage, but to Emily's own identity. So what are we going to do? He asked, ready to face any challenge alongside her. I think the only way to truly break free from her, Emily began, choosing her words carefully, is to confront her. I can't just hide, run away, or ignore the problem. I need to show Megan that I'm no longer the person that she controls, that I'm ready to take control of my life. The idea of confronting Megan was both terrifying and liberating for Emily. She knew that this confrontation would bring all her insecurities to the surface, that it would be a true test of her strength. But I also knew it was necessary. Megan needed to understand that her influence was gone, that Emily was ready to cut the ties that held her once and for all. Ethan heard Emily's words and saw the determination in her eyes. He knew this would be one of the most difficult times of their lives, but he also knew it was a crucial step towards recovering everything they lost. "If you think this is the best way, then I'm with you," he said, his voice filled with a firmness that surprised even himself. "We will face this together." The decision to confront Megan brought a new wave of tension. They knew they needed to plan every detail, anticipate her possible reactions and be prepared for anything. But most of all, they knew they needed to be united, that any crack in their alliance would be exploited by Megan. The moral dilemma facing Ethan and Emily was clear: how to confront someone who had caused so much harm, without losing themselves in the process. How to ensure that, by cutting ties with Megan, they would not also be cutting a part of themselves, of their own identities. And, more importantly, how could they prevent the confrontation from turning into a battle that could destroy what was left of their love? Every day that passed without the confrontation taking place was a day of preparation, both mental and emotional. Emily knew she was preparing to face not just Megan, but also her own demons, the parts of herself that she had allowed to be manipulated and controlled. She needed to come to terms with what she had done, with the choices that had led her to this point, before she could finally free herself. Ethan, on the other hand, struggled with his own emotions. He knew the confrontation with Megan was inevitable, but he feared what it would mean for Emily. She feared that by facing Megan, Emily might find herself drawn back into the dark world she was trying to leave behind. But at the same time, he knew that protecting Emily meant allowing her to fight her own battles, even if it was painful. When they finally arrived on the night of the confrontation, the air was thick with tension. They both knew that this was the moment of truth, the point of no return that would define the future of their lives. Emily was ready to face Megan, but she knew what happened next would change everything, forever. The meeting with Megan was arranged in a discreet cafe, far from the usual places where she and Emily usually met. Ethan insisted on being present, but from a distance, allowing Emily to have complete control of the situation. He knew his presence could make Megan retreat, but he also understood that Emily needed to face this battle alone. Emily arrived at the location feeling the weight of each step, but also with a determination that she hadn't felt in a long time. The cafe was almost empty, the peaceful atmosphere contrasting with the approaching storm. Megan was already there, sitting at the table, with a confident smile that immediately reignited Emily's anger. It was as if, for Megan, nothing had changed, as if she still had control. "You came," Megan said, her voice filled with a confidence that made her seem invincible. Emily sat down, keeping her posture firm. "I came because we need to talk," he began, remaining calm, although he felt his heart racing. "I need to make something clear, Megan. You no longer have power over me. Whatever was between us is over." Megan raised an eyebrow, visibly intrigued. He finished. "And what makes you think you can just get rid of me like that, Emily? Don't you understand how much I helped you? How much do you need me?" "I needed you at some point," Emily admitted, her voice filled with painful sincerity. "I was weak, vulnerable, and you knew exactly how to manipulate me. But now I see things as they really are. You weren't helping me, Megan. It was destroying me." Megan's smile began to fade, replaced by an expression of displeasure. "You don't understand, Emily. I did what I did because I love you, because I wanted the best for you. And now you come to accuse me? After everything we did together?" Emily felt the power of those words, but she didn't let them reach her. "That's not love, Megan. This is control, manipulation. I let you take over my life, I let you make me doubt my marriage, myself. But that's over. I'm not the same person you knew anymore." Megan leaned back in her chair, her eyes fixed on Emily. There was something unsettling about that look, as if she were deciding her next move in a game only she knew how to play. And you think you can just break free? That all this will disappear with one conversation? Emily took a deep breath, gathering all the strength she had. I know it won't be easy. I know that I will still have moments of doubt, that the memories of everything I did will not disappear overnight. But I'm willing to fight. And most of all, I'm willing to fight for my marriage, for the love I still feel for Ethan. You no longer have room in my life, Megan. Megan's fury began to emerge, an anger that until now she had kept contained. You're throwing away everything we've built, Emily. You're betraying me, as if I were the villain in the story. But the truth is that you were always weak, you always needed someone to guide you. And when you realize you're alone, you'll regret it. Emily stood up, her eyes fixed on Megan's, filled with a strength she didn't know she possessed until then. Maybe I was weak, yes. Maybe I let you manipulate me. But not anymore. I may have made mistakes, but I will fix them. And I will start now, cutting all ties I have with you. Megan was silent, processing Emily's words. She wasn't used to losing, especially not to someone like Emily who was always easy to control. Anger took over her expression, and she realized that, for the first time, she was losing control of the situation. Emily turned to leave, feeling a freedom she hadn't experienced in a long time. But before leaving completely, she stopped and, without looking back, said, I hope one day you understand that what you're doing isn't love, Megan. But until then, I want nothing more to do with you. Goodbye. Ethan was waiting outside, and when he saw Emily approaching, he knew something had changed. The expression on his face was one of relief, of newfound peace. He opened his arms, and she let herself be enveloped, feeling the warmth and security he always provided. Did you do what you needed to do? He asked softly. Yes, Emily replied, her voice firm. It's over, Ethan. It's finally over. The two walked together, knowing that they still had a long way to go, but that, for the first time in a long time, they were facing this path side by side, without the shadows of the past to haunt them. Megan, in turn, stayed in the cafe, alone. The penny was starting to sink in, and for the first time, she felt the emptiness of her own manipulation. She was alone, because the people she believed she controlled had finally broken free. And in that moment, she realized that her biggest mistake was not trying to control Emily, but underestimating the strength she would find within herself. As the couple moved forward, leaving behind the ghosts that haunted them, Megan found herself facing the reflection of her own choices, feeling the bitterness of the loneliness she herself had cultivated. And so, the cycle of manipulation and pain was broken, and Emily and Ethan, although scarred by battle, were ready to rebuild their lives, this time with the certainty that together they could face anything.